meeting. We are going to vote to, I'm sorry, we are going to, if you are a public member, you can register to speak to the commissioners by either raising your hand, or you can use the chat box and ask all panelists for the opportunity to speak to us. I'll say one more time, that public members can register to speak to the commissioners by raising your hands or using the chat box for the sake of organization and asking all panelists to speak. So now we're going to go into the call to order. Let's see. Just as a logistical processing of today's meeting, the OST team will unmute and notify individuals when they can speak. If all commissioners are unmuted for conversation, please put yourselves on mute when not talking to reduce background noise. When making or seconding a motion, identify yourself. All votes will be taken by roll call. And so we're gonna go around to ask for quorum today. I don't have the list of names with me on this slide, but let's see. Oh, sorry. Let me stay on track. So that being said, public commentary. Alex, can you confirm if there are any public members speaking in advance?
We don't have any public members speaking in advance at the moment. If anybody does want to speak that is present, that has not previously registered, please feel free to raise your hand like Dr. Lowe said, and we can definitely accommodate that request.
And please, Deborah, please correct me if I'm going out of order, but I'm following the protocol that we have here. So if anyone wishes to speak to the commission, you should do so by using the chat box and stating that you would like to speak. So, public speakers, I think Alice said that there was no one registered as yet. Just as a matter of protocol, public speakers who registered in advance will be permitted to speak first. Any additional public members may raise their hand to speak or request to speak via the chat box to the panelists. If you are speaking, you should provide your name and your applicable affiliation. You'll be permitted, each speaker will be permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes. After the speaker finishes, then commissioners can ask if there are any questions for the speaker. So with that being said, we are going to do the roll call attendance for the record. As I call your name, please assert your presence so we know who is here and so we can ensure that we meet quorum. Margot Berkey.
Present.
Thank you. Marcus Coates. I'll say one more time, Marcus Coates. You can come back. Tashana Crump. Hillary Desir.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Hansen.
Present.
Gary Hill. Thank you, Matt.
Present.
Thank you, Gary. Kiera Jenkins.
Present.
Thank you, Kiera. Lakeisha Jordan. Has Walter made it yet? I'm not looking at the screen. Okay. Dr. Safran. Thank you. Margaret Siegel.
Present.
Kenneth Taylor. Okay, thank you.
I believe you missed Commissioner Peeler.
Oh, my apologies. Yes. Heather Peeler.
Present.
Thank you, Heather. My apologies on that. How many do we have right now, Deborah? and then myself from here.
We have 10, so we have met.
Awesome. Thank you for confirming that we have met quorum. So now we're going to vote to approve the agenda.
It just mean, we can also then call the meeting to order at this time.
Thank you. So now that we have met quorum, I will now call the meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. Now we're going to go through the approval of the agenda. It will be taken in roll call style again. So we're asking all commissioners to review and motion to approve the agenda. Commissioner Margot Berkey.
Someone has to make a motion first to approve and then a second it.
Thank you.
Berkey moves to approve the agenda.
Thank you for keeping me on track, Deborah.
No problem.
Who seconded?
Siegel,
Second it.
Who made the initial motion? I'm sorry, I couldn't follow it.
I did. Margot Berkey.
And who seconds? We missed that.
I do. Margaret Siegel.
Thank you for seconding. The agenda has been approved, correct? Deborah?
Then we have to do the roll call.
Okay, thank you. So now we're gonna go through roll call style to vote to approve the agenda. So Margot Berkey.
Approve.
Thank you. Marcus Coates, I think he was here.
I approve. This is Hillary.
It's gonna be roll call style, sorry. Marcus Coates,
I apologize.
Tashana Crump, Hillary Desir,
I approve.
Matt Hansen, thank you, Hillary.
I approve.
Thank you, Matt. Gary Hill,
I approve also. Thank you.
thank you, Gary. Kiara Jenkins,
I approve.
thank you, Kiara. Lakeisha Jordan. I can't see if Walter came yet. Walter Peacock? What's your Peacock? Okay. Heather Peeler,
Approve.
thank you, Heather. Dr. Safran,
Approve.
Margaret Siegel,
Approve.
and Kenneth Taylor. If there are any commissioners that were unable to unmute, you can enter the vote in the chat box to all participants. Anyone who, if you wanted to oppose or abstain, you could have said either of those things as well. The motion carries with how many, Deborah, approving?
I didn't hear from Kenneth Taylor. I think I missed that.
I don't think he's
He's not on.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's not on. Sorry, then I miscounted.
Deborah, I think we have 8 commissioners and Dr. Lowe, so we're 9.
Yes, we're 9. I'm sorry, I mischecked Kenneth Taylor. We are 9, not 10, but we still met quorum.
So the motion thank you. The motion carries with 9 approving the agenda.
8.
8, sorry, that's including myself. The motion carries with 8 approving the agenda. So now we're going to vote to approve the minutes, and it will be taken in roll call style. November 17th meeting, a draft version of the minutes are provided. Are there any changes or revisions to the minutes? If there are no changes, we're doing a motion to approve the minutes, and we're going to do that as well in roll call style. So bear with us as I go through this again.
First,
I
we
need a commissioner to motion to approve the minutes. Any commissioner?
Motion to approve the minutes, Ms. Commissioner Peeler.
Someone to second?
I second Commissioner Jenkins.
Are there any discussions on the minutes? Thank you all. Vote will be taken in roll call style For our commissioners that are able, if you're unable to speak, if you're unable to unmute yourself, you can also enter your vote in the chat box for all participants. As I call your name, if you approve the agenda, please say approve. If you oppose, please say oppose. If you're choosing to abstain, please say abstain. So let's do this again. Margot Berkey.
I approve the minutes.
Thank you, Margot. Marcus Coates. Tasharna Crump. Hillary Desir.
Approve.
Thank you, Hillary. Matt Hansen.
Approve.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioner Gary Hill.
Approved.
Thank you, Gary. Kiera Jenkins.
Approve.
Thank you, Lakeisha Jordan. Walter Peacock. Heather Peeler.
Approve.
Thank you, Heather. Dr. Safran.
Approve.
Thank you, Dr. Safran. Margaret Siegel.
Abstain. I was
Thank
not
you.
at the meeting.
Thank you, Margaret. Kenneth Taylor. So how many do we have, Deborah, in total?
7,
Is that enough?
abstention.
Is that enough? I can't see my screen, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries with 7 approving. So let us continue on. Now we are going to have updates from the Office of Auto School Time Grant and Youth Outcomes. And now I'm going to share the floor with Kevin Cataldo from the Institute.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Good evening, commissioners. For the Institute for Youth Development, my most recent updates are that we actually are beginning to prepare to conduct school year site visits with the Institute team. We're going to slate to start the 83 school year site visits beginning in January of 2023. And we will be able to work through those 83 throughout January to the end of the school year. And currently we're mapping out and scheduling the site visits, as I just said, from January to June 2023. So we're looking forward to doing those. The bulk of these this year will actually be in person as well. We're going to move away from the hybrid approach as much as possible. And that's the update for the Institute for this evening. Does anyone have any questions for me? All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Lowe.
Thank you. And now we will have updates on our grants, and I'll hand it over to Katrina.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Let me pull this up. Okay, so right now the updates for the OST fiscal year grant dates. Most grant, there has been several grant agreements fully executed, meaning they were signed by the OST office as well as the grantee. Others are in progress to receive full execution. An update on the Summer Strong grants. The RFAs were released on Monday, November 28th of 2022, and the deadline will be January 9th, 2023 at 5 p.m. The mentorship competition award notice was issued December 1st, 2022. The grant agreement is currently being finalized. It's being finalized right now. Are there any questions on that?
I just have a kind of question comment. I don't know if Dr. Lowe is going to address where we are in terms of the next step in the execution, in terms of when the award notices will be going out. I don't know if you have that in another portion of your updates, Dr. Lowe.
Oh, award notices have gone out. Oh, for the school year? Is that what you're referring to?
2023.
So this is fiscal year 2023 that we're currently in. It started on October 1, and award notices have gone out for all of our school year grantees. When we say full execution, that means that they have been awarded a grant, they know the amount, and now we are in the process of executing their agreement with us. Execution means that we have to review their budget first to make sure that what they're spending is allowable. And we also have to make sure that their insurance is up to date prior to signing on both ends their agreement. So awards have already gone out. Full execution is in progress, meaning that we, as a team, we have to review their budget and review their insurance to make sure that they are in compliance. And then once those two things are complete, and correct me if I'm wrong, then we send the agreement to our grantee to sign, and then it comes to me as the ED to finalize. Once both parties have signed, it's considered quote unquote fully executed. And then at that point, we can begin disbursement of funds. So the award notices have gone out. I mentioned that in the last commissioners meeting. And now we are in the process of formalizing the agreement, which means that we are executing the agreement by signing on by both parties. Hope I answered the question. And if not, please let me know.
No, thank you so much for the clarity. I think I phrased my question wrong, and you kind of broke it down where my question is in terms of the grantees getting paid. So,
okay. So excellent question, because that's a very important question for our grantees. In order for them to get paid, it has to be fully executed, right? Which means that I have to sign and the grantee has to sign their ED or whoever is responsible for signing. Once the agreement is signed by both parties or executed, then we have to generate, well, not we, but is it OCFO? Correct me if I'm wrong, if I have the acronym incorrect, but they have to generate a PO number, and that is beyond us, the OST office. We share with them the fully executed agreement, which is formalizing the agreement, partnership. Then we have the PO number that is generated, which means that they can basically begin to invoice us. The PO process generation takes about 5 to 7 business days. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone can feel free to jump in. But to begin processing payments, we need 1, the fully executed agreement, and then 2, a PO number that is generated by finance. And then once we have the PO number, then they can begin invoicing us or getting the initial disbursement. Typically, it will take, to be quite honest with you all, about 30 business days for that to occur, for any payment coming out of the OST office.
So thank you again, additional clarity. So it sounds like to me, people don't get paid the next year. You already have grantees that have fully executed and have got paid this December. So the Christmas is be here in a couple of weeks. So I'm hear what you're saying in terms of the process. So I'm just trying to look at a timeline, especially with our funding capacity, because they really had a lot of questions our last subcommittee meeting about this. So just trying to figure out, so it sounds like to me, grantees won't get paid until next year.
Right now, we have about 20 something that are in queue for PO, and it likely will not happen until next year. That is the honest truth.
Thank you.
Early next
Appreciate
year.
it. Thank you so much.
Can I follow up with one question? Sorry, I'll put my camera on again. It's Margot. What is the date from which they can start charging expenditures to the grant? Is it the date of the purchase order, or is it some date of the grant, like the grant agreement, or what is the date?
It can start October 1, so it's retroactive.
Okay, so despite not having a purchase order, they're allowed to bill expenditures back to October 1?
Yes.
Okay. That's at least some comfort.
Riley, it is Best Kids. The question was asked, what organization is the recipient of the Mentorship Competition Award? And the organization is called Best Kids. Are there any other questions before we move on? Thank you for updating us, Katrina. Appreciate it. So I want to provide you guys with a very quick update, because last time we met, we spoke about hiring and how we are working really hard to not only manage our grants administration, but also to hire simultaneously. So here's where we are in the process. The 4 of our roles that are open currently, we will have a decision by tomorrow. because we have all the finalists for 3 of the roles. I have final interviews for the final candidates tomorrow for 3 of our roles: the grants management specialist, resource allocation analyst, and the data analyst. My day is filled tomorrow with final interviews for those roles, and by the end of the day or by early next week, I should have a decision on who to begin the reference check first before we extend an offer to them. For the supervisory grants management specialist, a decision has been made in partnership with the Deputy Mayor Kine. We have not formalized it as yet, so I will not share it publicly, the name, because we had to do a couple of checks first before we can formalize the offer for that individual. And then for the 2 roles that we are waiting for the 2 grants management specialists, they're posting by DCHR. So once those are posted, and we will begin they will be open for about 2 weeks. And that is the minimum amount of time we are allowed to post a role. And then once that is closed, then we will begin the vetting process for those 2 positions. But I did want to provide you all with an update on where we are, because as you guys know, we are doing the work of many for our office. And so right now, by the end of this week, we should have a clear idea, a sense of who we want to ideally extend an offer to for 4 of the 6 open roles. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you so much, Dr. Lowe, and congratulations in moving that very challenging aspect of the hiring procedures forward. May I ask, what is a resource allocation analyst?
Thank you for that question. So that person will be responsible. So you mentioned about reimbursements or payments. That work will be housed primarily with a resource allocation analyst, meaning that all invoicing, they will help support decision-making for grant awards. They will be in our past system approving invoices. Any questions that we have to field about invoicing or how the invoice is set up, it needs to be a certain way for it to be processed. If not, it will be sent back. So they will be managing all things finance, and they will be working in partnership with the supervisory grant management specialist to determine who gets how much for each competition.
So is that a new position?
It is a new position, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem. Any other questions before we move forward? Today's it's a pretty heavy agenda today. Barring any other questions, should I just continue? I'm not sure if Chairperson Peacock is here. Just keep going. So now we will transition into commission updates. Really quickly, just so you guys are aware, the Coordination and Collaboration Committee is seeking both a chairperson and committee members. If there's anyone that may be interested, please reach out to Alex Brown. He is Alex, ALEX .Brown @dc.gov. And I'm asking one of you guys to please put his email in the chat as a point of reference for in case someone is interested or wants to pass on his information to someone who might be interested in joining that committee. Now we're going to talk about appointment of committee members, specifically for the Outcomes and Needs Assessment Committee. Can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. So the OST office has received nominations for community members and stakeholders interested in OST commission committees. Names were provided for the Outcomes and Needs Assessment Committee. Are there any other committee members with other names to nominate? Outside of this special December meeting, moving forward, we will work to approve any new committee members on a quarterly basis. They will all be appointed committee members. The nominees for the Outcomes and Needs Assessment Committee are Kelly Quinn, Andrea Jones, and Carlos Manjarres. Please welcome the new members of the Outcomes and Needs Assessment Committee that are now appointed to the Outcomes and Needs Assessment Committee. Now we're going to review the calendar dates for 2023 with one point of discussion. So please note, I have it in red, 7/27. Next slide, please. Thank you. So reminder of the dates for our 2023 commission meeting. 6/22 was added June 22nd, was added last meeting due to the traditionally low turnout rate in July. Last year, July was the only time we did not meet quorum. And so the question to all is, do we want to remove the 7/27, July 27th date and replace it with the June 22nd, which is added? And then we can reconvene in September, on September 28th. Any initial thoughts? Can we all please confirm, if applicable, that we are okay with removing the July 27th date, given the historically low turnout, and then replace the July 27th date with the June 22nd date? Does that work for the commission members that are present today?
This is Commissioner Saffron. Yes, that works.
Any apprehensions about this, or?
The last day of school. We're going to want to not be meeting at night, but that's okay. I can do it.
Okay, thank you for sharing that context. That is helpful as well. So we are going to, though we know it's the last day of school, we are going to move forward with the June 22nd date, and then we will remove the July 27th, given that, as mentioned before, we traditionally do not have a high turnout because it's heading into the summer, full-blown speed into the summer months. The last thing I will share with everyone before we hand it over to the DC Policy Center is want to remind you all of the strategic plans timeline. The last meeting today, today's a special meeting for the needs assessment to share what the preliminary findings, and subsequently updates will be made to the strategic plan prior to our January 26th commission meeting in consideration of what we hear from the needs assessment. For 2023, we have the timeline on the screen. The goal is to have the final vote and approval of the updated 3-year strategic plan by, as we guys mentioned, June 2023. If sooner, we will need to have special and shortened meetings with public notice focused specifically on the strategic plan. So you guys can see on the screen the roadmap, so to speak, for the finalization of the strategic plan. And are there any questions before we hand it over to the DC Policy Center? Thank you all. So at this time, what I will do is hand over the floor to the DC Policy Center to share their preliminary findings from the needs assessment. The floor is yours, Yashin and team.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lowe, and thank you so much for having us over tonight. We're really excited to share with you some of our preliminary findings and next steps that we are taking to bring this research to an end. I was wondering, Dr. Lowe, if I can share my screen.
Alex, can you make that happen, please, if you don't mind?
Yes, I'm passing the privileges to you now, so you should be able to share screen.
Very good. Bear with me because I'm really bad at getting to the writing. Okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can see your screen. Just need to make it in presentation mode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm going to quickly update you on where we are and what our next steps are. Please feel free to stop me with any questions or comments as I go through.
Can you make it into a slideshow so it can be bigger so people can see?
Good.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. As I said, I'm very bad at this. All right. So these are our preliminary findings, and we're in the early stages, but we're progressing very quickly. So what I will walk through is the findings from the 2017 study on the capacity and needs, where we are with the data collection, a few notes on the methodology and preliminary findings. And then I'm going to walk you through what our next steps are. As I said, do please stop me if you have questions, and I will pause to take them. The first time this research was done looking at the capacity of out-of-school time program providers and the potential need for those was 2017. And that study looked at the capacity in 2016 and found that there were about 33,400 children and youth attending subsidized after-school programming in the District of Columbia. Most of them were in the younger grade bands, pre-K through 8th grade, so elementary and middle school, and about 4,700 of them in high school levels. In addition, there were about 1,500 kids, according to the study, from pre-K 3, so those are the 3-year-olds to 12th grade, who participated in regular summer programming programs. At that time, we conducted parent and student focus groups and found that public and private funding levels available to providers were not necessarily sufficient to meet the demand or need for subsidized programming in DC. There were lots of programs had long wait lists, especially in the summer, and the parents and caregivers had to piece together multiple forms of care to cover their children's after school and summer hours. So this is from 2017 when we published the report. At that time, we looked back at the data in 2016. I can't believe that is what, 7 years ago. So I just want to walk you through the landscape of subsidized out-of-school time programs and how we are collecting data on those. Sorry. So they're basically 5 sources of out-of-school time programs in DC. The first one is the community-based organizations. These are the groups that the Office of Out-of-School Time Programs work with in subsidizing. They are largely nonprofit, almost all of them nonprofit organizations providing after-school weekend or summer programs. And sometimes they do it in schools and sometimes they do it in other locations. The way we're reaching them is through, first, we have sent surveys asking folks about their capacity needs and attendance, program areas, location, who they're serving, what type of students and whatnot. We sent out this survey to approximately 200 community-based organizations, and we've received responses from about 103. So that's one source of data that we're using to build our report. And then we're also using administrative data from Deputy Mayor, the Office of the Deputy Mayor of Education, specifically from Dr. Lowe, who has been helping us with some of the capacity information about the current grantees that OST office has. So that's like the first big chunk of providers. The second big chunk is the Title I schools at the DC Public Schools, DCPS. These schools provide after-school programs for students, and most of these programs are paid for by federal dollars. We have the capacity and attendance information for every Title I school. The DCPS offices have shared with us this administrative data, so we're very confident in its usefulness. So that's the second big chunk. The third big chunk of providers are schools that are not Title I, so they're not getting money from federal government to run after-school programs. And then charter schools, as you know, charter schools enroll nearly half of the students. So these schools also provide after-school programs using their own resources. We include them in our analyses because sometimes the schools use their per pupil funding formula dollars to pay for out-of-school time programs, which qualifies them as subsidized. Other times they may be using, I shouldn't say other times, in combination, sometimes they use fees they charge households to pay for these programs. We are excluding programs that are entirely paid for parents because they're not necessarily subsidized by the government. To collect information on this, we sent out surveys to approximately 100 non-Title I schools and charter schools. I shouldn't say schools, LEAs, because they are local education agencies, some have multiple campuses. So we sent to about 100 schools and LEAs, and the response rate has been really good, about 78 responses. So those are the big three buckets for academic year programs. We also have programs at the Department of Parks and Recs. We just heard from that they'll be sharing our administrative data with us. So DPR generally provides summer programs. There are some programs that are held during the school year, but they're relatively small. And then we have the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program, again, largely summer programs, largely catering to high school students. And we are using data, administrative data from the Department of Employment Services to estimate their capacity. So that's the big landscape, and that's kind of data that we're using. Before I move on to other data, I just want to pause for a minute. I know, just so Heather asked a question about the libraries. We haven't included the libraries in our previous program. They offer some programs, but with no regular consistency of that would count as out of school time programs. They're more like weekend, once a week, couple hours a week kind of thing. So we have included them, but if you have a reason that we should include them, we will take a look. So I'll stop now to take any other questions. Thank you, Heather.
Hi, Commissioner Barkey here from DC Public Schools. I just wanted to ask about two things. One is because I happen to manage the Title I elementary school funded after school programs, right?
That's great.
The slide is a bit slightly misleading to me, I think, in that DCPS has far more Title I schools than are actually served by the grant that we receive. And the grant is only a portion of the funding, so there's a combination of both local government funds and federal funds supporting that, and it's really only at currently at 55 of the Title I schools. So that's a clarifying point. And also, I don't see the DCPS summer programs listed either. You know, DCPS provides summer school to quite a few.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. First, on your first point, you're absolutely right. And we're totally aware of that. But we have asked DCPS about the summer programs and we received no information. So, Commissioner Berkeley, with your permission, I would like to reach out to you to see who I can reach. We can reach out
to get some data on summer. Sure, I'd be happy to help with that. Absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you.
Clarifying question: did you say you did not include fee-based organizations in the non-Title I schools? You know, where parents are paying a fee.
Yes, we haven't included them because we're looking at publicly subsidized.
Okay, okay. Because there are quite a few children being served in those programs. It's thousands of children, but so,
yeah, especially wards 2 and 3, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I will be happy to assist with the summer data.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Sorry, my phone. So just before we move to the preliminary findings, we're using two other sources of data in our analyses. We are using parent surveys. We've received great help from PAVE, Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. They have conducted two parent surveys, one in English and one in Spanish. And we're using some information from these surveys to understand what are some of the sort of like constraints that the parents are facing. And then the DME has been a great partner. So we have student level data provided by the DME to kind of build these exposure maps to see the proximity of programs to students living in the District of Columbia. So our preliminary findings, these are just row counts, and we're still thinking about how to estimate from row counts. We have found right now, based on the row counts we received from our surveys and administrative data, about 36,000 slots available to students during the school year, mostly in after-school programs. To put this in context, that's about a 10% increase from 7 years ago. So that's, and we're still working on this. We have a number of follow-up questions with some of the CBOs to see if there are additions or subtractions to this number, but we're working on this. Last time around, the study conducted by the DC Posting Center did not look at weekend hours, but this time we asked about it. We found about 8,500 seats available to students during the weekends, and we found about 16,000, nearly 6,400 seats in the summer available to students. Last time around, this was a very small number. We found 15,000 slots in the summer, but about 10,000 of it was summer youth employment program. So the summer capacity really increased because of the programs available in non-Title I schools and CBOs. And as we just discussed, we are missing the summer slots in DCPS Title I schools. So this number is probably much higher than what we see here. We have found 12,600 slots in the Summer Youth Employment Program, and we are working with the Department of Parks and Recs to see what their counts are. Most of their programs are in the summer. They have a small number of programs that run through the weekends during the school year. There are some other programs that are subsidized. For example, the Department of not the department. The DC Housing Authority has some after school and weekend programs. We reached out to them, but we haven't heard anything. So before I move on, I will stop for a minute to see if there are any questions.
You do actually have one question, but before I get to the question, I also have a comment that came through the chat, and they were just wondering if it was possible to remove your calendar notifications because it's actually blocked.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, so sorry about that. Let's see. This tells you how sorry my life is, but yes, I will remove them. Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
I have a question, Commissioner Jenkins from DC Public Charter School Board. I see that your counts in your slides group together DCPS, non-Title I and charters. Do you happen to have any data in like your findings that isolate charters in particular?
Yeah, we can isolate the charter schools because these are all surveys that we sent out to, and the response rate was great, 78%. It is really, really high. So we can tell which ones are charter schools and which ones are DCPS non-Title I schools. However, Commissioner Jenkins, the last time we did this work, we were very careful to be sector agnostic, and we didn't want to like really single out any school or any sector.
Right.
So I think our final study will not really point out what is charter and what is not.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, I will move on to the next slide.
Sorry, and then Dr. Saffron actually had a question as well. She said, are the 55 schools in DCPS that you are talking about funded by 21st Century? 21st Century?
I'm sorry, can you repeat this again?
Yes. All right. Are the 55 schools in the DCPS that you are talking about funded by 21st Century?
Yes, they are all, some of them receive, I think most of the 21st Century grants go to CBOs, but some of those CBOs provide services on school premises.
The Title I DCPS programs would have to be the ones that are funded with the 21st Century Grant and local government funds.
That's right.
Yeah, so yes, the 55 schools that we have in the grant, in our network of DCPS organized after-school programs are funded in part by the 21st Century, yes.
Are there any questions? I'm sorry, I cannot see the chat when I'm looking at the screen. All right, I'll move on. Please stop me if I should not. So we looked at the counts by program location for the community-based organizations. The largest number of programs are in wards 7 or 8. This shouldn't be surprising because those wards hold the largest number of public school students, followed by Ward 1, and then the smallest number of programs are in Ward 3 and Ward 6. These are also the wards with the fewest number of Title I programs. We asked providers the predominant race and ethnicity that they serve. These are total counts of providers and not the capacity they have, although we're working on that number right now. The most frequently providers report that the students that they serve are predominantly Black. We heard from 85 providers that are telling us that, and there are about 23 providers serving Hispanic students. There are lots of providers serving students of multiple races. This is a new kind of like a more amplified way of collecting data on race that started in 2020. So we're hearing more about this. The groups that are served less frequently are Asian students, largely reflecting the demographic makeup of DC public school students. And in both ethnicity and race questions, we didn't hear from about 10 to 14 providers. We asked providers if they have bilingual staff, and in the community-based organizations, 72% of those who responded, again, our response rate was about 50%, they reported that they do have bilingual staff. School-based programs, these are again non-Title I and charter schools. We're not including in here DCPS, after-school programs. There were about 60% of the respondents told us that they have bilingual staff. Let's see. Mental health has been a real focus of concern in the District of Columbia since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the first time we asked providers if they conduct any mental health screening. A lot of the providers are still not doing this, but we heard that at least there are about 40 providers that provide mental health screening, and about 16 of them do it once or more times during the year. There are about 23 that said that they do it with a different frequency. We just don't know what that frequency is. We actually had high response rates. Just a lot of providers have not really moved to that space yet. Before I'll just stop for questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, I have Commissioner Hill. Yeah, and do you have a breakdown in terms of wards?
We do.
For the number that do provide mental health services for students?
We do. We just don't have them here, but these are providers and we can map them exactly where they are. So we have a breakdown by ward. We have a breakdown by school sort of catchment areas or even at the census block level. So yeah, we have very granular data on this.
I have a quick question about the bilingual staff slide, the previous one. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about how you define that, because I think at the top it said that you had gotten 100 plus responses for CBOs, but there's a note here saying 64 respondents were excluded because they didn't respond to the question. So if you could tell us more about what the 72% there means.
Yeah.
And then does that mean that they're offering bilingual programming, or just that they have staff who speak more than one language?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So yeah, we have excluded 64 respondents. So we overall with about 300 recipients. We had 100 in school-based programs and 200 CBOs that received the survey. And then we received about 100 from CBOs, 78 from schools. 64 of those, about 178 did not respond. So this is the rest of them. This is not about bilingual programming, although we have asked about it. We haven't had a chance to analyze it yet, so it will be in the final report. This is just the staff that they have who can speak multiple languages.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Commissioner Siegel. Could you go back to the mental health screenings slide, please?
Sure.
Do you have information on who is doing the mental health screening and what they include in mental health screening? How detailed is it? Is it a one-time? Can you tell us more about that?
We know who is doing it and who is not, but we don't know exactly what they are doing. The question was simply, are you doing mental health screening? But we didn't do a deep dive into what kind of mental health screening.
Or whether the staff is providing it, or whether they've contracted with a mental health provider to do it.
I wish we had asked that, but we haven't.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a great next step question.
Absolutely. Any other questions? All right, I'll move on. We asked providers if they ask families to contribute in user fees. This was a big issue when we talked to the families. They were really concerned about the user fees. We didn't receive responses from 59. There were about 127 that said no. Only a handful said yes. Even if we were to assume that those no responses are yeses, and we just don't know, that's speculative, that still tells us that a majority of the subsidized out-of-school time program providers do not ask families to contribute, which is probably appropriate given that they're getting subsidies. I'll stop for a minute to see if there are any questions. All right. We've asked providers if they trained staff for additional learning needs for students with disabilities, English learners, or any other learning needs. And 49% of the providers said that they are doing it. And then 32% said no. And there were a group of providers who just said they had no idea what that question meant. Again, this seems like a great next step thing. As we start seeing academic learning shift from school day to after school with tutoring and other programs, maybe a more holistic approach to after school programs is needed. And this was our sort of a way of trying to figure out if the out of school time programs are paying attention to student needs. As I mentioned, we did a survey with parents. We also held a focus group with parents, and we also held some focus group with providers. So I'm going to share some findings with our meetings with the providers and our meetings with the parents, and the providers also responded to this question through the survey. The main issues for the providers is the variation in the student enrollment and attendance. A lot of the providers see students enroll but not show up, and they worry about that. They also mentioned that when they are trying to hire staff, it takes a long time to secure clearance for staff. This didn't come as a surprise to us. We have recently been doing some work with the Department of Human Services on housing providers that provide services to youth experiencing homelessness. And we've been doing some work on teachers and substitute teachers. In all these areas, the number one issue that's been mentioned to us is how difficult it is to offer a job to someone and not get clearance. And the Child and Family Services Agency that does the clearance for to make sure that somebody is not on some database, they take a great time to do so. They are overwhelmed, and that's also affecting out of school time programs. We met with the parent ones, and one of the parents who actually works for DCPS offered to serve as a volunteer in an after-school program, and I think 4 months after their offer to do so, they still didn't have the clearance. So this is a big issue. Related to that, providers worry about lack of staff and high turnover. This is a big shift from 2017. A study in 2017, there was an abundance of professional staff that DCPS and others have used for out of school time programs. This time around, everybody is really having a hard time finding staff. Providers mentioned not enough funding, and then basically the timing of the funding when they receive the funds is not necessarily matching the time when they're spending the money. This is again, I think, a problem across all grants in DC government. We found this again with providers for youth experiencing homelessness. Space is a big issue for providers, especially community-based providers. And then providers mentioned that sometimes it's hard to get a commitment or communication from schools or DME in terms of what will happen to them next year. Before I move on to the parent survey findings and focus group findings, I'll stop to see if there are any questions.
Yes, we received a question in the chat, and it was talking about the one of the previous questions when you were talking about specific learning needs, or were they all asked all together? For example, question A: are staff trained to work with students with disability? Question B: are staff trained to work with English language learners?
I have to go back and look. I'm sorry, I cannot remember. I think this was the question, just additional learning needs.
Okay.
Thank you. The findings from the parents survey, this was hard for us to process this because they very much mimic the findings from the 2017 focus groups and surveys that we did. Parents are most worried about programs being too far away and hard to get to. There are certain programs that parents prefer to send their kids to, but they're not nearby. Parents are worried about affordability. This is a big concern for the summer and high quality programs during the summer. I think during the school year, they find that they have more options, but the summer programs are very difficult. I just heard from some parents that their kids was like on the wait list as number 1,000 something on some of the DPR programs. It's just a really difficult number to process for the parents. So most of them basically give up the ghost on publicly subsidized programs and turn to privately funded programs. And that's very expensive. Parents mention difficulties finding programs. Learn24 website is not always easy for the parents to navigate. They've also had problems enrolling. They show up the day the seats open and they're too late. They don't necessarily understand the process, and they kind of complain about lack of seats. None of this probably are surprising to this particular group, because I know that DME is working to improve parents' access to program information. There were lots of COVID concerns, not necessarily like if I send my kid to out of school time programs, they'll get COVID, but parents felt like COVID really weakened capacity. And parents have a hard time figuring out where to find this information. They worry about the breakdown of communication from programs and schools that they just not are hearing from programs and schools. Before I move on to the next steps, I will just stop to see if there are any questions. All right. I'm just going to skip this. There will be a lot of details on what. Hold on, let me. The methodology. I'm just going to briefly talk about what our next steps are. So we have some row counts. We have reached back out to some of the providers that did not provide full information to get more details about their programs. We're working with DPR to get information from DPR. And the next step for us is tally up the row numbers, think about how to estimate from row numbers what the capacity might be. We are working to build some exposure maps, which are essentially if you are a kid in DC living in any ward or in a specific place, how many programs are there within a half a mile of your house or your school? How does that change by ethnicity, by learning needs and things like that? So we're working on that. We're working on building maps of capacity, maps of need. We're also working on building more information on what we learned from the parents. And our goal is to finish this work. Oh, I can't believe this. This is December 8th, before Christmas, and we've already started drafting a report and have a rough draft for a review for Dr. Lowe early in January. And so it's very exciting. I feel I was there in 2016 when we were doing the first round of this study. We have far better information and participation and details right now. So very excited about it, but it's going to be a lot of work for us over the next 2 weeks. I'm done. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what would you say is one of the bigger takeaways for you in the, in thinking about the 2017 as compared to now?
The capacity growth of 10% is pretty significant in my point of view. That's a great thing. And we can actually ask these questions about mental health, and we have questions about program area. So in the final report, we'll have more details on how out of school time providers are focused on, academic programs, STEAM programs, entrepreneurial programs, sports programs, things like this. And last time around, we didn't have the capacity or the knowledge to ask for these. So we have learned a lot, and the providers have definitely become more sophisticated. So that's what makes this very exciting. What doesn't make it very exciting is the complaints from the parents are pretty much the same as the complaints from 7 years ago. I think that the COVID, outside of this research, we did a survey of parents in the DC region, DC and out of, in the suburbs, about their sort of preference for DC public schools and other types of schools and what motivates them and what doesn't. In that survey, this was a scientific survey that we conducted in February of 2021, about a year into the pandemic. One of the common complaints with the parents, which drew them to private schools or schools out of DC, was the lack of after-school and extracurricular programs I found that very interesting. That wasn't what we were after at all. We were out kind of trying to figure out if parents leave DC public schools, you know, they have no reason to voice their concerns, but we should ask them because that's important for policy. So I was very surprised about this focus on extracurriculars and out of school time programs. And I think getting information to the parents in a way that it's almost like a retention policy. If we told them more about what we have, they're more likely to keep their kids in DC public schools. That's sort of, to me, it's my personal interest. So I find that really interesting.
February 2021, wasn't that when DC Public Schools was entirely virtual?
Yes.
Okay, so there were no after-school opportunities during the virtual year. That's
right, and that was a huge.
It's kind of an aberration for that 1 year. Anyway, yeah.
That's true, but that was a huge deal for the parents. They weren't worried about quality. They weren't, we asked them about a lot of things, but that was the thing that stood out.
I just want to say that the parent feedback that you received in many ways mirrors the data that we collect from our own parents and our parents survey for the 55 schools that we're working with. And we've certainly, particularly when it comes to, concern about capacity, we have wait lists at many schools. And certainly they feel that communication could have been better last year. This was based on last year's data. And last year I felt like everybody was struggling throughout the year on so many levels with the residuals from COVID and, the unpredictability of staffing and even programs being able to stay open on any given day because staffing was so short, classrooms being closed. So I think it doesn't surprise me that you got the same kind of feedback because I think last year was very much an aberration when it comes to so many factors. But, anyway, it's interesting.
It is. Thank you.
Hisham and team, I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time out to be with us and to share your preliminary findings. We definitely do look forward to the more in-depth report as we move forward and look towards the strategic plan. Walter, do you want to take over or do you want me to close out?
Sure. Yes. Thank you again. And commissioners, I'd like to deeply apologize for my lateness. This afternoon was coming from a conference and got caught up on the road trip back. But thank you again, Dr. Lowe, for holding things down. I really appreciate the great work, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Yes, ma'am. Let's see. So are we, Dr. Lowe, are we at the commission updates now? Okay.
Yep, we are at the next steps. So can you flip the slide, Alex? Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Should be slide 18. Next slide, Alex.
Yeah, on my end it shows slide.
Oh, now I can see it. Now I can see it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little delayed.
Okay, got it. Team. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. So each committee is being asked to use the findings from that needs assessment to inform the selection of the strategic plan. Where applicable, please make sure to update your section and please forward any updates to Dr. Lowe by close of business on Monday, January 23rd of the new year. That way we can make sure we stay on target with that timeline for the needs assessment. Now, regarding the next meeting, all commission meetings will continue to remain virtual if that is what is agreed upon. If anyone does have any concerns regarding the virtual meetings and wants to go back to hybrid, please let us know. But currently that is what's stated by the DC government, so we're going to continue to do that. That next commission meeting will be held on January 26th of 2023 from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And once again, as stated, that meeting will be virtual. Now, let's see. The next item on the agenda is just to motion to adjourn if there's no other comments, unless anyone else would like to add anything.
I just want to ask one question.
Absolutely, sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Just, I want to make sure that the commission wants to move ahead on the WebEx platform and not on the Teams platform. Because I know there's been a little back and forth, and I just want to hear from the commissioners, because we're going to send out all of those meeting holds.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Just to start off, I personally am a lot more comfortable and familiar with Teams, but I don't know how everyone else feels. So thank you for opening up the floor for that discussion. Would anyone else like to comment on that?
I would appreciate if we switched over to Teams. WebEx seems to have some challenges.
Great,
For
thank you.
Teams as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Deborah, were there commissioners who were struggling to access Teams? I know that the first one or two times you use it, it's a little bit hard to get into it. Is it?
I think Alex received some emails from a couple of people, but I think that anyone who had problems with Teams also had problems with WebEx. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think the only thing is like with for ease of things, with it's easier to monitor and to manage the actual participant list, especially when we have outside guests with WebEx. However, it's not. I mean, of course, neither one is a true problem or anything of the sort. But I think we started out with WebEx because it was much easier to manage who was actually able to speak and how to manage the mute features and different things of that nature. However, with Teams, it seems like this is a group and in which like everybody is respectful of the space and respectful of the conversation, in which nobody actually is over talking anybody, or there is no additional feedback in which we need to truly monitor the back end anymore. But that was the initial reason why we did utilize WebEx as opposed to Teams to begin with, and that's just background information for anybody who was wondering why.
And Alex, do you have a problem with Teams if we move to that platform for the rest? Would that work for managing everything else that you do on the back end?
Yeah, that definitely works. Definitely works.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Yeah, I was gonna say as well, although we have our preferences, you're the one doing the majority of the lift regarding the platform. So I think your vote carries a bit of weight to it for sure. Yeah, thank you again. Okay, well, commissioners, are there any other comments or business that we need to discuss? Okay.
Question regarding the
Question?
final report from the Policy Institute. Will we have the final written report prior to well, by the beginning of January, let's say? It sounded as though it was going to include additional detail.
Yeah, Shem, so we have our next meeting on January 23rd. Would we be able to get a copy of the final report in early January, like say by January 10th or 15th? To give everyone time to digest. Are they here? Hold on.
So it looks like Yeshim left. I don't want to provide an answer for her, but during our meeting today, this isn't for sure. We are trying to get it done by the end of the year. And then final draft early next year, like first 2 weeks of January after our vacation.
Okay, sounds good. In other news, I wanted to personally welcome our new committee members and thank you all for joining us. We're definitely happy to have you. Committee chairs, thank you very much for the great work that you have been doing in recruiting those new members. We really appreciate that, and would love to continue to see those committees grow. So thank you again. Deborah, I would also like to personally thank you so much for everything that you've done over the years from the start of this commission, and even the work you've done for our community and for our local government even prior to this commission. So thank you so much. You've been a tremendous help to all of us, to me personally, and we're really gonna miss you, but we're happy to see you moving on to new things for your life as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Peacock. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of the work that you and, of course, the commission does.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Commissioners, are there any other comments or feedback before we close out?
No, just really quickly, I just was wondering if I could get the calendar. So maybe someone could just send me the calendar for the committee meetings in 2023. I think it was one of the slides we looked at.
Yes, and we will be sending out very soon now that we're going to move to Teams, we will send out those holds for everyone's calendar. But the first one is going to be January 26th. So if everybody on the call right now just wants to put a hold on their calendar, Thursday, January 26th is the next meeting.
Thank you, Deborah. Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, if there are no further comments, commissioners, whenever you're ready, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn.
Thank you. That was Commissioner Peeler.
And
Yeah.
Commissioner Siegel seconds.
Okay. Thank you again. Okay. Now, typically we would do a roll call. However, this vote tends to be pretty unanimous across the board. Are there any that oppose to this motion to adjourn? Okay. So it looks like this motion to adjourn unanimously passes. Again, commissioners, thank you so much for the excellent work that you're doing. Thank you to our new committee members. And Deborah, thank you so much for everything that you've done for us. We're really going to miss you. Congratulations again to you. And Dr. Lowe, thank you again for stepping up and filling in for me in my absence. Great. All right. Well, take care all. Thank you again and happy holidays.